Well, good morning and welcome to LFCC Global TV. We're live from Perth, Western Australia. We're starting to head into winter. It's starting to get a bit cooler here. So wherever you are in the world, I hope you're having a great day as well. We are here to talk, as we said last week, about spirit-to-spirit transfer. With myself, I'm Leanne, Pastor Leanne Shaw, and this is Dr Reg. And you've actually written a book here, Reg, called Spirit-to-Spirit Transfer. Mm-hmm. And I've certainly read it many times, I think, at this point.
Yep.
You've given some really great insights as to what happens when we hang around wrong people, when we ourselves perhaps go into a bit of a funk, what is happening in our lives. The world knows that if you hang around positive, exciting people, it kind of catches that energy, don't we?
Yeah.
So it sort of makes sense that the same happens when you hang around depressed people or hang around people who perhaps have a criminal mindset or all those types of things. So start to unpack this for us and what is actually happening in spirit-to-spirit transfer.
I think for starters, we have to have a sense of humor. I mean, I wish we can actually play the X-Files theme song.
We'll see if we can add that.
Yeah, if we can add that, will be good. We all can remember Dennis Scully and Fox Mulder, who was my favorite characters. I've been watching few of the episodes in the last few days.
Oh, okay.
Brings great memories of the 1990s. I just want to let you know that we all know Bible says in the book of Deuteronomy or Exodus says very clearly the fact of the matter that Moses was in the ministry. Now, as Moses was in the ministry and as he has been praying, ministering, and his father-in-law comes and tells him off, if you keep on sort of doing this long-term counseling and seeing one person at a time and a day, eventually you'll wear out. And then somewhere along the line, scripture also says that as he was getting older, he was getting tired, he then raises up 70 people or 70 elders. He then lays his hands and everyone prophesies for that very time. And so through that model, God then started to show me, at about 10 years ago, he then started to show me that as much as godly transfer, there are also evil transfer. Right about 10 years ago, there was a young man, about 23, 24 years of age. This young man came to our church when we first formed our church in Mount Claremont Community Center. And he has been hanging around with quite a lot of young men and a lot of young women. And this young men and women, they had some kind of mental illness. And, in his heart of a heart, he has got this desire, wanting to help them. And obviously, I think, the medicine was there to help. The doctors are there, the psychologists are there. But he literally has got a heart as like a social welfare worker. He just wanted to hang around. About 9 or 10 odd people. He used to not minister in our word. He was just secular. He just hang around, just positively encouraging on a regular basis. However, given time, maybe 12 to 18 months of spending time, eventually he then also had the same illness and disease came in. He then eventually said to himself, I will never get out of the house. I will lock himself. Right at that moment, there was a young lady in our church. And that young lady mentioned about our church and about me and said, you need to come to this meeting or to this service and you can be set free. And he did come a couple of times, and by the grace of God, God finally broke that over him. It was at that juncture, God then said to me, I want you to write a book called Spirit-to-Spirit Transfer. There's another Canadian author, I forgot his name. Yeah, that's right, Alex Ness. Alex Ness wrote a book called Transference of Spirit way back in 1980. 485. It was a major hit every part of the world. If you can still get a copy, it's very rare. It's a red in color, and the title is Transference of Spirit by Alex Ness, a Canadian author, a Canadian pastor. He wrote a book on this, and I read it for that moment. But my angle comes very differently from Alex Ness' book because the way that God showed me, revealed to me what he was trying to do in this. And so I was very thankful to God that Dr. Frank Holgren was able to forward this book when he was alive. I just want to let you know that a lot of us in this world think that because we know some knowledge, because you have been imparted or taught by, say, university or by secular places, you could actually overcome, their pain, their agony. For instance, I came to know of a couple in the recent times, and their children are our children's friends. They sort of grew up together, but the wife is a clinical psychologist and kept on working some of those young people who seem to, go through, the other end of the spectrum, cutting, different identity issues and all the above. And in the last 12 months or so, due to this excessive work overload of working, eventually now she is in that place, and she is now said to her husband, let's part this marriage, let's finish this marriage. I do not want to be in this marriage. My thinking has changed.
Yeah, right.
And so for you and I, we know exactly what is taking place. But for someone who's outside of the exposure of the Bible will say, oh, well, he or she is burnt out. My premises is she's not burnt out. She's just been given, her heart was not protected, her spirit was not protected. Another spirit has come and latched upon it. Now she questions her husband, questions the relationship, questions the entire marriage premises. And now she says, I don't want to. I think this new style of cognitive thinking is more relevant to my life than the old style of looking marriage is the bedrock of our foundation.
Right,
so that has changed.
Yeah, right. So it shifted some things in her life. I mean, I even remember counselling one time, I think it was around relationship, marriage counselling. I had 3 very intensive marriage counselling situations, and unbeknownst to me, by the time I got home that night, guess what? I have an argument with my husband because there had been some level of transfer conflict that was in their lives that had come onto mine.
I remembered we had a very argumentative couple one afternoon in our home. This was about 8 years ago. My wife and I were trying to sort it out because it's on the rocks, it's about to go through, and we were just doing as much as we could. I think, my wife often says 1 hour, 45 minutes is maximum. It went to 1.5 hours.
Right.
As soon as they left, for some unknown reason, my wife and I entered into a huge argument, finding some of the smallest faults. And I unbeknown to me, I myself got into this argument, thinking to myself, and then it took me a long time. And I said, why are we arguing about a small matter? Just before this couple came, we were fine. We were perfect. Everything was going good. And so every so often, when we do have some couples coming through, we do talk about this. I said, my love, if we are going to minister, we cannot buy that spirit into us. Right. But that's because we have gone through maturity. We've gone through, we know how to identify ourselves, where we are, what we are. But what do you do for those people who do not know spirit to spirit transfer and they don't buy into it?
So I guess what we're trying to say to some of our viewers here today, that if something has shifted in your life, or if you are suddenly, from 6 months to 12 months later, something is different, you're more depressed, then these are some of the indicators that could show that there's been a transfer of spirit on your life. So what would you then, say to people? What are some of the indicators that perhaps something has happened, that they may not be aware of, but they know that something shifted in there?
The husband and wife can become overnight snappy.
Right, okay.
They can run you down pretty quickly. Anything and everything you do, it's never good enough.
Right.
And just being, instead of really talking about the whole entire matter around the coffee table, a person will decide to bury his head or her head into the sand, don't want to talk. The other thing you'll find is the silent treatment. You won't speak to your partner for the next 3-4 days. That's just a minor one. And then you've got the excessive one. The excessive one would be, the husband, wife, or the children, or whatever it is. They will almost find to a point that I've come across that they will have thoughts of murdering their own mother, or stabbing their husband, or doing excessive things to the point that if you were to if you were to go outside of this home and go to shopping, your husband will follow, and you've got all this, what do you call, this, not harassment, but stalking kind of thing, spirit of control more will take place. That's what we call the excessiveness of the power of the spirit, which can actually work upon. And I think most of the times when we find, when a murder were to take place or something were to take place in this part of the world, if you start to track back and trace back where it's coming from, because they've hung around, with people who are not with right frame of mind. And if and particularly also if a man or a woman were to claim that he or she is born again Christian, and for some unknown reason, if they are not really, if they don't find strength in God, what God has given to them in life right now, they will forever feel inadequate. And out of the inadequacy, if that person goes and sits with another person, whatever the person says about you, they're still vulnerable, and they still say, well, I can understand. Instead of backing the husband, backing the wife, they won't back the wife, they won't back the husband, they'll back the opponent party. Because they find that spirit is able to gel because there's a loophole in their life.
Right. Well, Reg, I think we've got a lot more to cover here today. Our 10 minutes is up for today. So, guys, we are going to continue with this for next week, and we're going to talk to both Christians and non-Christians about how this impacts your life, but more importantly, what you can do about it. Ultimately, though, Jesus is your answer.
Yes.
And we're going to share about how you can have him in your life. Meanwhile, if there are any questions or comments, please feel free to fill those out, and we'll see you next week. God bless.
Thank you.